Ma'am, I need you to step away from that child immediately and put your hands where I can see them. The words cut through the bustling noise of Chicago O'Hare International Airport's Terminal 3 like a blade. Airport manager Richard Brennan stood 5 feet from me, one hand hovering near his radio, the other pointing directly at my 8-month-old daughter cradled against my chest. Emma's blonde curls caught the fluorescent lighting as she reached for my face with her tiny pale fingers, completely unaware that her own mother was being accused of stealing her. My name is Lila Morrison, and I'm 31 years old. 6 hours ago, I kissed my husband David goodbye at our home in Atlanta before boarding this connecting flight. I never imagined that my daughter's skin color would turn a routine layover into a public accusation of child trafficking. Sir, I don't understand what's happening, I said carefully, instinctively tightening my hold on Emma. My heart hammered against my ribs, but years of corporate presentations had taught me to keep my voice steady even when everything inside me screamed. Brennan's jaw tightened. He was maybe 55, with the kind of face that seemed permanently set in disapproval. His navy blazer bore the airport's official badge, and he wore it like armor of unquestionable authority. "Don't play games with me," he said loudly enough that passengers at nearby gates turned to stare. "That child is clearly not yours. Look at her. Look at you." The statement hung in the air like an indictment. Emma's porcelain skin, blue eyes, and wispy blonde hair contrasted sharply with my dark brown skin and black coiled hair pulled back in a neat bun. To Brennan and the growing crowd of onlookers, the visual evidence seemed irrefutable. "She's my daughter," I said quietly, bouncing Emma gently as she began to fuss from the tension in my body. "Her name is Emma Grace Morrison. She's 8 months old. I have her birth certificate in my bag." "Birth certificates can be forged," Brennan interrupted, stepping closer. "I've been managing airport security for 17 years. I know trafficking when I see it." A woman in her 60s with a rolling suitcase stopped completely, her expression hardening as she looked between Emma and me. "Oh my God," she whispered to her companion. "He's right. That baby is white as snow." Another passenger, a middle-aged man in a business suit, pulled out his phone and started recording. "Finally, someone with the guts to do something," he muttered approvingly. "You see this stuff on the news all the time." I felt the familiar weight of being watched, judged, and found guilty before I could speak. This wasn't my first encounter with strangers questioning whether Emma was really mine, but it was the first time someone with official authority had weaponized those doubts. "Emma's father is white," I explained, hearing the defensive edge creeping into my voice despite my efforts to stay calm. "My husband David, we've been married for 4 years. I can call him right now." "Convenient story." Brennan cut me off again. His eyes scanned the growing crowd, seeming to draw energy from their supportive murmurs. "Every trafficker has a story. Let me see your ID and that birth certificate. Now." With Emma balanced on one hip, I reached into my diaper bag with my free hand. My fingers brushed against my wallet, Emma's documents, and something else, the leather portfolio I always kept for emergencies. I pulled out my driver's license and Emma's birth certificate, hands trembling slightly as I passed them to Brennan. He barely glanced at them before shaking his head. "These don't prove anything. The child's skin tone is biological evidence that contradicts your claim." "Biological evidence?" I repeated, disbelief cutting through my careful composure. "My husband is white. Genetics doesn't work the way you think. I think you need to stop talking and comply with security protocol." Brennan interrupted, pulling out his radio. "Security to gate C-17. Possible child trafficking situation. Need immediate assistance and contact with local police." The crowd had grown to maybe 20 people now, forming a loose semicircle around us. I could see phones pointed in my direction, capturing every moment. A young woman was speaking rapidly into her phone. "You guys, I'm watching them stop a trafficker at O'Hare right now. She's trying to claim this white baby is hers." Emma started crying, sensing my racing pulse. I automatically swayed and whispered soothing words, but Brennan took a step forward. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to hand over that child to airport security until we sort this out." Those words, "hand over my child," triggered something primal. "Absolutely not," I said, my voice firm for the first time. You have no legal authority to take my daughter from me based on skin color. I have every authority to ensure child safety in this airport. Brennan shot back. Your refusal to cooperate only confirms my suspicions. A security officer appeared, young and uncertain, clearly responding to Brennan's radio call. Sir, what's the situation? Suspected child trafficking. Brennan announced loudly. Subject refuses to relinquish custody of a child who is clearly not biologically hers. I need you to escort her to the security office for questioning. The elderly woman from earlier spoke up again. I saw her acting nervous when I walked by earlier. Kept looking around like she was worried someone would notice. I had been looking around for the Starbucks. I'd promised myself after Emma's diaper change. But now that innocent action was being reframed as guilty behavior. This is insane, I said, my voice shaking now despite my best efforts. I'm a mother traveling with my daughter. I have documentation. I can prove. Then you'll prove it in the security office. Brennan interrupted. He turned to the security officer. Jake, take her. The young officer named Jake hesitated, looking uncomfortable. Sir, maybe we should just verify the documents first? If she has a birth certificate. Did I ask for your opinion? Brennan snapped. This is my call. Take her to holding. As Jake moved reluctantly toward me, I made a decision. My free hand moved to my bag, not for a weapon or to run, but to retrieve my phone. I unlocked it with my thumbprint and opened my contacts, my finger hovering over a name that Brennan couldn't see from his angle. Before this goes any further, I said quietly, I need to make one phone call. You'll make your calls from the security office, Brennan replied dismissively, but I had already pressed the name on my screen. The phone rang once, twice, then connected. Layla? David's familiar voice came through, slightly worried. Baby, what's wrong? You sound... David, I need you to listen carefully, I said, my voice steady now with purpose. I'm at O'Hare, Terminal 3, Gate C-17. The airport manager has accused me of trafficking Emma because she's white and I'm black. He's trying to take her from me. There was a brief, dangerous silence on the other end. Then David's voice came back. But it had transformed into something I rarely heard, the tone he used in federal courtrooms. Put him on the phone. Right now. I held out my phone to Brennan. My husband would like to speak with you. Brennan scoffed. I don't take calls from alleged traffickers' accomplices. He waved at Jake. Take her phone. 2. Evidence. What Brennan didn't know, what none of the recording phones or judging crowd members knew, was that the call was still connected. David was hearing everything. And somewhere in downtown Chicago, in the federal courthouse where he worked, my husband was about to make decisions that would turn Richard Brennan's world upside down. I glanced at my watch. 12:47 p.m. in exactly 8 minutes, Brennan's confident authority would begin to crumble. But first, he would make his situation so much worse. If you're finding yourself drawn into this story of injustice and wondering how a mother's simple travel day turned into a nightmare, don't forget to subscribe to see how this unfolds. Because what Richard Brennan was about to discover was that some accusations carry consequences far beyond what any security manual could have prepared him for. Jake reached for my phone, but I pulled it back smoothly, keeping it pressed to my ear, even though David had gone silent on the other end. He was listening, recording, gathering evidence with every word Brennan spoke. Ma'am, I need that phone, Jake said apologetically, his discomfort evident. Officer, I have a legal right to contact my family during a detention, I replied calmly. Unless I'm under arrest, you can't confiscate my personal property without cause. Brennan's face flushed red. You want to talk about legal rights? How about the legal right of that child to be protected from predators? The word predators sent a ripple through the watching crowd. A woman gasped. The man filming stepped closer, making sure he captured Brennan's accusation clearly. She's a predator, someone in the crowd muttered. Look how she's holding that baby like a shield. I was holding Emma the way every mother holds a distressed infant, close, protective, secure. But now even that instinct was being weaponized against me. Emma's cries intensified, her little face scrunching up in that way that meant she was getting genuinely upset. I needed to feed her, change her, Get her somewhere quiet. Instead, we were trapped in this nightmare tribunal with strangers acting as judge and jury. She's making the baby cry, the elderly woman declared. A real mother would know how to calm her own child. The irony was suffocating. Emma was crying because she could feel my stress, because we were surrounded by hostile strangers, because her feeding schedule was disrupted. But in Brennan's narrative, even my daughter's tears became evidence against me. I need to feed her, I said quietly. She's due for a bottle and she needs a diaper change. Can we at least move somewhere private while you verify my information? You'll feed her under supervision after we establish custody rights, Brennan replied dismissively. He turned to the growing crowd like a prosecutor addressing a jury. Folks, I apologize for this disruption. We take child safety very seriously at O'Hare, and sometimes that means making difficult but necessary interventions. Several passengers actually applauded. The man in the business suit called out, "Good job, manager." Better safe than sorry with kids. Brennan smiled, feeding off the validation. Thank you, sir. It's gratifying to know the public supports vigilant protection of our most vulnerable. On my phone, still connected, I heard the faint sound of David's voice speaking to someone else. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized the tone he was giving instructions. Fast, precise, authoritative instructions. 2 Chicago police officers appeared at the gate, summoned by Brennan's earlier radio call. They were younger, maybe late 20s, and they approached with a cautious assessment of professionals who knew situations weren't always what they seemed. CPD, the first officer announced, a tall black woman with sharp eyes. Her nameplate read Officer Williams. We got a call about possible child trafficking? Brennan straightened, his authority reinforced by official backup. Yes, officer. This woman claims this white child is her biological daughter, but as you can see, that's biologically impossible. She's refusing to cooperate with security protocols. Officer Williams looked at me, then at Emma, her expression neutral but her eyes calculating. Ma'am, can I see some identification? I already showed him my driver's license and Emma's birth certificate, I said, nodding toward Brennan. He dismissed them as forgeries. I'd like to see them myself, please, Williams said calmly. I shifted Emma to my other hip and pulled out the documents again. My hands had stopped shaking. The arrival of actual law enforcement somehow felt safer than Brennan's unchecked authority. At least police officers had protocols, oversight, consequences. Williams examined both documents carefully. Her partner, Officer Martinez, stepped closer to observe. These look legitimate to me, Williams said after a moment. Birth certificate shows mother as Lila Janelle Morrison, father as David Michael Morrison. Child's name Emma Grace Morrison, born February 14th of this year at Emory Hospital in Atlanta. Forgeries can be very convincing, Brennan interjected quickly. But they can't change biology. Look at that child, officer. Look at her skin, her hair, her features. There's no way. Interracial families exist, sir, Martinez interrupted quietly. My wife is Korean. Our daughter looks nothing like me. The simple statement landed like a bomb in Brennan's narrative. For the first time, his certainty wavered slightly. This is different, he insisted, but his voice had lost some of its edge. The child shows 0 characteristics of African American heritage. 0. My husband is white. I said again, forcing patience into my voice. David Morrison. He works in Chicago. I can have him here within 20 minutes to verify. Anyone can claim a husband. Brennan cut me off, recovering his momentum. Officers, I respectfully request you detain this woman until proper verification can be established through official channels. DNA testing, family services evaluation, the works? Officer Williams glanced at her partner, clearly uncomfortable. Sir, we don't have cause to detain someone who has valid identification and birth documentation. The documents appear legitimate. Appear legitimate isn't the same as confirmed legitimate, Brennan pressed. I'm invoking airport security protocols. As airport manager, I have authority to... You have authority over airport operations, not over lawful citizens with proper documentation. Williams interrupted firmly. Unless you have actual evidence beyond your personal opinion about skin color, we're not detaining anyone. The crowd murmured with dissatisfaction. This wasn't the dramatic arrest they'd been expecting. Brennan's face reddened further. I could see him calculating, trying to find another angle. Then his eyes lit up with what he clearly thought was a winning strategy. Fine, he said coldly. But I'm banning her from this airport pending investigation. MAAM. You are hereby prohibited from entering any area of Chicago O'Hare International Airport until you can provide conclusive proof of your relationship to that child. Officers, please escort her out of the terminal. You can't ban me from a public airport without cause, I said, my voice still calm but my grip on Emma tightening. I have a connecting flight to catch. This is federal property with federal regulations. I absolutely can ban individuals who pose potential safety threats. Brennan interrupted triumphantly. It's within my discretion as airport manager. You can take it up with my superiors after you leave the premises. Officer Williams sighed. Ma'am, technically, he does have the authority to issue temporary access restrictions. We can't override that. The young woman who'd been live streaming spoke up excitedly. Y'all, they're kicking her out. The manager just banned the trafficker from the whole airport. Her phone screen showed 47,000 viewers watching live. The hashtag O'Hare trafficker was already forming in the comments. This is racial profiling, I said quietly but firmly. You're banning me from this airport because my daughter's father is white. And you've decided that's impossible. I'm banning you because you can't provide adequate proof of custody. Brennan corrected smugly. There's a difference. I have her birth certificate, which could be fraudulent. I have my identification, which doesn't prove the child is yours. What proof would satisfy you? I asked directly, looking Brennan in the eyes. He smiled, the expression condescending and final. DNA testing through official channels. Supervised by family services. That's what would satisfy me. The trap had been set and sprung. Brennan wanted me out of this airport, away from witnesses, separated from my flight, unable to prove my identity until I jumped through whatever hoops he invented. DNA testing, I repeated slowly. On my phone, still connected, I heard David's voice again, speaking to someone with urgent authority. That's right, Brennan confirmed. Until then, you're banned from O'Hare. Officers, please remove her from the terminal. Officer Williams looked genuinely regretful. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but if the airport manager issues a temporary ban, we have to enforce it. Emma had stopped crying and was now staring up at me with those clear blue eyes, completely trusting that her mother would protect her. I kissed her forehead gently and whispered, It's okay, baby girl. Daddy's handling it. Brennan heard the whisper and laughed. Daddy's not going to save you from federal trafficking charges, sweetheart. This is real life, not some movie where everything works out. You're absolutely right, I agreed quietly, shifting Emma to a more comfortable position. This is real life. And in real life, actions have consequences. Something in my tone made Officer Williams glance at me sharply, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. But Brennan was too intoxicated by his own authority to notice. Move along, he ordered, gesturing toward the terminal exit. Your ban is effective immediately. I checked my watch again. 12:53 p.m., 6 minutes since I'd called David. In downtown Chicago, 8 miles from this terminal, my husband had just finished making phone calls that would reshape Richard Brennan's entire future. But Brennan didn't know that yet. He was still riding high on the crowd's approval, the police officer's compliance, and his absolute certainty that he'd caught a criminal. As Officer Williams and Martinez began to escort me toward the exit, the crowd parting to let us through with satisfied expressions, I kept my phone connected and my daughter close. Because what Richard Brennan was about to learn was that some people you should verify before you accuse. And he'd just accused the wrong mother on the wrong day in the wrong airport. Officer Williams and Martinez walked on either side of me as we moved through Terminal 3 toward the exit. Emma had settled against my chest, her tiny hand gripping my shirt. Behind us, I could hear Brennan's voice addressing the remaining crowd. Folks, I want to thank you for your patience during this incident. Your safety and the safety of children in this airport will always be my top priority. More applause. Someone called out. You should get a medal for this. My phone was still connected. I raised it slightly and spoke clearly. David, they're escorting me out of the terminal. Brennan issued an airport ban. Officer Williams glanced at me but didn't object to the phone call. Martinez looked increasingly uncomfortable with the entire situation. David's voice came through, steady and cold. I heard everything. Baby, I need you to trust me. Don't leave the airport property. Stay in the public area outside the terminal. Understood? Understood, I replied quietly. Good. Help is 3 minutes away. The call ended. I tucked my phone into my pocket as we approached the automatic doors leading out to the passenger pickup area. Ma'am, Officer Williams said quietly as we walked. Off the record, I think this whole thing is ridiculous. But my hands are tied unless you can provide additional verification. I understand, I replied. You're just doing your job. She nodded, seeming relieved that I wasn't directing my anger at her. For what it's worth, those documents looked completely legitimate to me. And I've seen plenty of forged IDs. We stepped through the doors into the late September afternoon. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of jet fuel and exhaust from the constant stream of taxis and rideshares. Where should I wait? I asked. Martinez pointed to a covered area about 50 feet away. The public waiting zone over there is technically outside airport jurisdiction, but still on the property. You can wait there without violating the ban. Thank you, I said genuinely. As the officers turned to head back inside, Williams paused. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Of course. When you said Daddy's handling it to your daughter, you sounded very certain. Is there something we should know? I met her eyes directly. Officer Williams, in about 5 minutes, you're going to get a call that will make this entire situation very clear. When you do, I'd appreciate if you remembered that I cooperated fully despite being racially profiled and illegally banned from a federal airport. She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll remember. I settled onto a metal bench in the waiting area, adjusting Emma in my arms. She was hungry, I could tell, but she was being remarkably patient. I pulled a bottle from my diaper bag and began feeding her, the familiar routine bringing a small measure of calm to the chaos. Around me, travelers came and went, oblivious to what had just happened inside. A few people recognized me from the terminal incident and gave me wide berths, whispering to their companions. One woman actually took a photo from a distance. My phone buzzed, a text from David. 2 minutes. I love you both more than anything. This ends now. I texted back. We're safe. Emma's eating. Take your time and do it right. Another text came through, this one from an unknown Chicago number. Mrs. Morrison, this is Janet Chen, Senior Legal Counsel for the Chicago Aviation Authority. Your husband contacted our office. I'm en route to O'Hare with proper documentation. Allowed 90 seconds. I allowed myself a small smile. David hadn't just called me, he'd called the very people who had authority over Richard Brennan's employment. Inside the terminal, visible through the glass walls, I could see Brennan still holding court at gate C-17. He was speaking with the young woman who'd been live streaming, probably giving an interview about his heroic intervention. The irony was almost beautiful. Every moment he spent basking in his perceived victory was another moment he was on camera, on record, creating evidence of his actions. A black SUV pulled up to the curb with official government plates. 3 people emerged. A woman in her 50s wearing a sharp business suit, a younger man carrying a briefcase, and David. My husband looked the way he did when he was about to destroy someone in court calm, focused and absolutely lethal in his precision. He spotted me immediately and crossed the distance in long strides. Baby, he said, wrapping his arms around both Emma and me. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? We're fine, I assured him, feeling the tension in my shoulders finally release slightly. Just humiliated, accused, and banned from the airport. His jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. Not for long. The woman in the business suit approached, extending her hand. Mrs. Morrison, I'm Janet Chen, Senior Legal Counsel for the Chicago Aviation Authority. I've been briefed on the situation by your husband, and I want to assure you that this matter will be resolved immediately and completely. Thank you, I said, shaking her hand. The younger man opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to need you to provide a statement while everything is fresh. Audio and video recording with your consent. You have my consent, I said. David had moved to stand beside me, one hand resting protectively on my shoulder as I gave my statement. I recounted everything: Brennan's initial accusation, his dismissal of my documentation, his inflammatory language to the crowd, his refusal to allow me to make a phone call, his airport ban. Janet Chun's expression grew progressively darker as I spoke. When I mentioned Brennan's statement about biological evidence, she actually closed her eyes in what looked like pained disbelief. Mrs. Morrison, she said when I finished, on behalf of the Chicago Aviation Authority, I apologize profoundly for what you've experienced today. What occurred inside that terminal was not just unprofessional. It was illegal racial profiling and unlawful detention. The police officers were actually reasonable, I added. Officer Williams especially. She clearly thought the whole thing was wrong, but felt she had to comply with Brennan's authority. Chun nodded, making a note on her tablet. We'll keep that in mind. Now I need to ask, are you willing to press formal charges against Mr. Brennan? I looked down at Emma, who had finished her bottle and was dozing against my chest, milk-drunk and peaceful. Then I looked up at David, who met my eyes with an expression that said the choice was entirely mine. Yes, I said firmly. Not just for me, but for every other mother who gets profiled like this and doesn't have the resources to fight back. Good, Chun said. Because the Aviation Authority takes these matters very seriously. Brennan's actions today violated federal civil rights laws, airport policies, and basic human decency. David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and smiled grimly. Janet, I just got confirmation from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They're opening a federal investigation into Brennan's conduct based on the live stream footage that's already gone viral. How many views? I asked. Last count, 2.3 million across multiple platforms. Hashtag O'Hare Trafficker is trending, but the narrative is starting to shift. People are questioning why Brennan assumed you were trafficking based solely on skin color. Janet Chun straightened her suit jacket. Mrs. Morrison, Mr. Morrison, would you please accompany me back into the terminal? It's time to have a conversation with Mr. Brennan about his immediate future with this organization. What about the ban? I asked. Chun's smile was sharp as a blade. As of 30 seconds ago, when I received authorization from the airport director, that ban is voided. You have full access to all areas of O'Hare, and Mr. Brennan has zero authority to prevent it. We walked back through those automatic doors, David carrying our luggage while I held Emma. Officer Williams was still near the security checkpoint, and her eyes widened when she saw our entourage. Officer Williams, Janet Chun called out. Please accompany us to Gate C-17. Your presence may be needed. Williams fell into step beside us, and I caught her muttering under her breath. I knew something was off about this whole thing. As we rounded the corner toward the gate, I could see Brennan still there, still talking, still completely unaware that his world was about to implode. David leaned close and whispered, Are you ready for this? I kissed Emma's sleeping head and straightened my shoulders. I've been ready since the moment he called me a predator in front of all those people. That's my girl, David murmured. We approached Gate C-17 like a small army. Janet Chen in the lead with her briefcase and official authority. David at my side with legal expertise and righteous fury. Officer Williams providing law enforcement credibility, and me carrying the evidence that had started this nightmare. Brennan saw us coming. For just a moment I saw confusion flicker across his face. Then recognition as he spotted me. Then anger. Officers, I told you to escort her off the premises, he called out. She's banned from this airport. Janet Chen stepped forward, her voice carrying across the gate area with absolute authority. Mr. Brennan, I'm Janet Chen, Senior Legal Counsel for the Chicago Aviation Authority. Your airport ban has been voided, and you are hereby suspended from your position pending investigation into civil rights violations, unlawful detention, and abuse of authority. The color drained from Brennan's face. What? Who authorized you can't just... Airport Director Martinez authorized it personally 3 minutes ago. Chun interrupted crisply. And yes, we absolutely can. Your employment badge and access credentials, please. Immediately. The crowd that had supported Brennan so enthusiastically moments ago now stood in stunned silence. Phones still recording but capturing a very different narrative than they'd expected. Brennan's hands shook as he unclipped his badge, but his voice tried to maintain authority. This is absurd. I was protecting a child. That's my job. Look at them, anyone can see that baby isn't hers. David stepped forward for the first time, and his voice carried the weight of federal authority that came from years in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Mr. Brennan, my name is David Morrison. I'm an assistant U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. The woman you accused of child trafficking is my wife. The child you claimed couldn't possibly be hers is our daughter Emma. And the civil rights lawsuit you're about to face is going to be the least of your legal problems. Brennan's face went from pale to ashen. She's been trying to tell you that for the past 20 minutes. David said coldly. But you were too busy playing hero for the cameras to verify anything. If you're watching this unfold and wondering how one man's assumptions could destroy his career in minutes, make sure you're subscribed because the full consequences are about to get very real. The young woman who'd been live streaming lowered her phone slowly, her expression transforming from excitement to horror as she realized she'd broadcast a massive injustice to millions. And Richard Brennan, who'd been so certain of his authority just minutes ago, stood holding his badge with trembling hands, finally understanding that he'd accused the wrong family. But the full weight of his mistakes hadn't even begun to fall yet. The silence at gate C-17 stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Brennan found his voice, defensive and desperate. You're an attorney? She never mentioned. I had no way of knowing. She told you her husband's name was David Morrison. David interrupted icily. She offered to call me for verification. You refused. She showed you legal documentation. You dismissed it as forgery. She explained basic genetics. You called it a convenient story. Janet Chen pulled out her tablet, swiping through screens. Mr. Brennan, I'm looking at your employment record right now. This isn't your first complaint involving racial profiling, is it? Brennan's eyes widened. Those were dismissed. Unsubstantiated claims from people trying to... From people trying to what? Chen asked sharply. Travel while black? Exist in spaces you decided they didn't belong? Officer Williams stepped forward, her professional demeanor firmly in place. Mr. Brennan, I'm going to need you to come with me. There are some questions that need answering downtown. Downtown? Am I being arrested? Brennan's voice cracked slightly. Not yet, Williams replied. But the U.S. Attorney's Office has requested an interview regarding potential civil rights violations. You can cooperate voluntarily, or we can make it official. The man in the business suit who'd been filming earlier suddenly spoke up, his phone still recording. Wait, so she really is the mother? He accused her of trafficking her own kid? Based solely on skin color, David confirmed, his arm protectively around my waist. My wife is African American. I'm white. Our daughter inherited my coloring. This isn't complicated biology. It's basic genetics that Mr. Brennan chose to ignore in favor of racial assumptions. The elderly woman who'd called me shameful earlier looked genuinely distressed now. Oh my God, I said those terrible things. I'm so sorry. I just assumed. You assumed because a man in authority told you to. I said quietly, speaking publicly for the first time since returning to the gate. That's how discrimination works. Someone with power validates your biases, and suddenly they feel justified. My words, captured on multiple phones, would later be shared across platforms as the defining soundbite of the incident. Janet Chun turned back to Brennan. Mr. Brennan, I've just received authorization to inform you that your suspension is effective immediately and will be unpaid, pending the outcome of multiple investigations, federal civil rights, Airport Authority internal affairs, and potential criminal charges for unlawful detention. Criminal charges? Brennan repeated, his face now visibly sweating. I was doing my job. Your job is airport operations management, Chun replied coldly. It is not immigration enforcement. It is not child protective services. And it is absolutely not racial profiling of passengers who have committed no crime. David pulled a document from his briefcase. Mr. Brennan, this is a federal complaint I filed 18 minutes ago with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. It details your actions today, including your physical attempt to separate a mother from her nursing infant, your public accusations of child trafficking without evidence, and your unlawful ban from federal property. I won't allow your, Brennan said suddenly. Smart move, David agreed. Because in addition to the federal investigation, my wife will be filing a civil lawsuit for defamation, emotional distress, false imprisonment, and violation of her civil rights. Conservative estimate? 7 figures in damages. The color completely drained from Brennan's face. 7 figures? I don't have that kind of... You won't, David interrupted. But your homeowner's insurance might. And when they deny coverage because you acted outside the scope of your employment, your personal assets become fair game. House, retirement accounts, everything. I watched Brennan's world crumble in real time. His confident authority had evaporated, replaced by the dawning horror of someone realizing they destroyed their own life through their prejudice. The young woman who'd been live streaming approached hesitantly. Mrs. Morrison? I'm Jenna. I was streaming this whole thing and I'm so sorry. I called you a trafficker. I told 2.4 million people you were stealing that baby. You believed what you were told by someone in authority, I said, not absolving her but acknowledging reality. The question is what you do now. Jenna nodded, lifting her phone again. Can I stream your side? Let people know what really happened? I looked at David, who nodded. Then back at Jenna. Yes, but on one condition you use this platform to talk about how quick we are to believe the worst about Black mothers. How we criminalize them for existing in spaces society says they don't belong. I will, Jenna promised. I absolutely will. She turned her phone camera to face herself and her followers. Okay everyone, I need to issue a major correction and apology. That woman I called a trafficker? She's not. She's a mother with her own daughter. The airport manager racially profiled her, and I helped spread it to millions of you. We need to talk about what just happened here. Janet Chun's tablet chimed. She read the incoming message and her expression hardened further. Mr. Brennan, I've just received reports from 3 other passengers who witnessed your treatment of Mrs. Morrison. Additionally, the Aviation Authority has received formal complaints from 4 different individuals, claiming you've previously profiled them based on race. We'll be investigating every incident. This is a witch hunt, Brennan protested weakly. No, I said firmly, Emma stirring slightly in my arms at my tone. A witch hunt is what you did to me. An investigation is what happens when someone abuses their authority and finally gets held accountable. Officer Martinez approached, having been radioed by Williams. Ma'am, we've reviewed the surveillance footage from the gate. It clearly shows Mr. Brennan approaching you aggressively, refusing to examine your documentation properly, and making inflammatory statements to bystanders. That's going in our report. Thank you, officer, I said. David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and showed me the screen a news alert from the Chicago Tribune. O'Hare Airport manager, suspended after viral racial profiling incident. The story was already breaking. Within the hour, it would be national news. By tomorrow, Brennan's name would be synonymous with racial profiling and abuse of authority. Janet Chen gestured to 2 airport security officers who'd been standing by. Please escort Mr. Brennan to collect his personal belongings from his office. He is no longer permitted in any operational areas of this airport. As the security officers flanked Brennan, he made one last desperate attempt. This is insane. I saw what I saw. That baby is white. She's Black. Anyone with eyes can see. Anyone with eyes and basic human decency can see a mother with her daughter. David cut him off sharply. Anyone with a brain understands that genetics doesn't work the way your prejudice assumes. And anyone with access to the internet is about to watch your career end because you couldn't conceive of an interracial family existing in your airport. Emma chose that moment to wake up fully, her blue eyes blinking open. She looked around at all the faces, then up at me and smiled. That beautiful, innocent baby smile that showed her two bottom teeth. "Mama," she babbled, reaching for my face. The simple word, caught on multiple recording devices, was perhaps the most damning evidence of all. This child knew exactly who her mother was. The elderly woman started crying. "I'm so ashamed. I have grandchildren from my son's mixed marriage and I still assume the worst. What's wrong with me?" "That's something you'll need to figure out," I said gently but firmly. "Preferably before you hurt someone else with those assumptions." Janet Chun concluded the professional demolition. "Mr. Brennan, you'll receive formal notification of your termination hearing within 48 hours. Given the severity of these violations and the public nature of this incident, I anticipate the recommendation will be permanent termination and blacklisting from all aviation authority positions nationwide." "Blacklisting?" Brennan's voice cracked. "I've worked in airport management for 17 years. This is my career, my livelihood. You should have thought of that before you accused a mother of trafficking her own child," David said without sympathy. "Actions have consequences, Mr. Brennan. You're about to learn that lesson very thoroughly." As security led Brennan away, the man stumbling slightly in shock, the crowd that had once supported him now parted in silence. Several people were visibly uncomfortable, perhaps recognizing their own complicity in what had occurred. Officer Williams approached us once more. "Mrs. Morrison, Mr. Morrison, I want to apologize on behalf of CPD. We should have pushed back harder against his accusations. You ultimately did the right thing," I acknowledged. "You didn't escalate to arrest. That matters." David checked his watch. "Layla, you're connecting flight boards in 40 minutes. Do you still want to make it?" I looked down at Emma, then around at the gate where I'd been publicly humiliated less than an hour ago. "Yes, I'm not letting his racism disrupt our family plans any more than it already has." Janet Chun nodded approvingly. "I'll have our VIP services team ensure your boarding process is smooth. And Mrs. Morrison? Thank you for being willing to press charges. Too many incidents like this go unreported because the victims just want to move on. I can move on and demand accountability at the same time," I replied. "If you're realizing that staying silent in the face of injustice only protects the people causing harm, subscribe to see how this story ends and what lasting change comes from one mother's refusal to accept discrimination." As we walked toward the gate for our rebooked flight, passengers stared, but this time with very different expressions: respect, shame, curiosity. The narrative had completely flipped. But the full scope of Richard Brennan's downfall was only beginning, and the changes that would come from this moment would extend far beyond one man's terminated career. 6 months later, the federal courtroom in downtown Chicago was packed with observers, journalists, and civil rights advocates. Richard Brennan sat at the defendant's table, looking 20 years older than he had that September afternoon at O'Hare. Judge Patricia Whitmore reviewed the settlement documents with meticulous attention. "Mr. Brennan, you understand that by agreeing to this settlement, you are admitting liability for civil rights violations, defamation, and unlawful detention?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brennan said quietly, his voice barely audible. "And you understand the terms? $1.2 million in damages to Mrs. Morrison, mandatory civil rights training that you will personally fund, and a permanent injunction preventing you from working in any airport, transportation security, or law enforcement capacity nationwide." "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Whitmore signed the documents. "This case is concluded. Mr. Brennan, I hope you spend the rest of your life understanding why your actions that day were not just wrong, but dangerous. Racial profiling doesn't protect anyone, it destroys trust, traumatizes innocent people, and perpetuates the exact discrimination our laws are designed to prevent." I sat in the gallery beside David, Emma sleeping peacefully in a carrier against his chest. She'd grown so much in 6 months crawling now, saying more words, completely oblivious to the legal battle fought in her name. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. I'd learned to handle media attention over the past months, though I'd never grown to enjoy it. "Mrs. Morrison, how do you feel about the settlement?" "Justice isn't just about money," I replied carefully. "It's about accountability and change. Mr. Brennan will never be able to profile another family the way he profiled mine."
That matters. What happened to Brennan after his termination?
I glanced at David, who nodded slightly.
We'd heard through legal channels about Brennan's complete collapse. Fired from O'Hare with cause, blacklisted from aviation nationwide. Divorced by his wife of 22 years, who'd been horrified by the viral footage, unable to find employment even outside his field because his name triggered instant recognition.
Mr. Brennan's consequences are his own responsibility, I said diplomatically. My focus is on preventing this from happening to other families. And we had made changes. Real, systemic changes. The Morrison Protocol had been implemented at 17 major airports across the country. Mandatory verification procedures before any passenger could be detained on suspicion of child trafficking. Specific training on interracial families and the genetics of skin color. And immediate supervisor review for any detention based primarily on racial appearance. The Chicago Aviation Authority had overhauled their entire civil rights complaint process, creating an independent review board with actual authority to investigate and terminate employees who engaged in discrimination. Officer Williams had been promoted to sergeant and now led the airport's community relations division. She'd personally apologized 3 times and had become an advocate for better training at the intersection of law enforcement and racial justice. Jenna, the young woman who'd live-streamed the incident, had transformed her platform into an education space about unconscious bias. Her follower count had grown to 8.7 million, and she used it to amplify voices of people who faced discrimination without the privilege of legal recourse. Even the elderly woman from the gate, Eleanor Hutchison, had reached out months later with a trembling handwritten letter describing her journey of confronting her own prejudices and volunteering with interracial family support organizations. Mrs. Morrison, what would you say to other mothers who face similar profiling? This was the question that mattered most to me. I adjusted my position so the cameras could see me clearly. Document everything. Know your rights. Don't internalize the shame that people try to project onto you. And if you have the resources to fight back, fight not just for yourself, but for every mother who comes after you who might not have those resources. David added, the law is only as strong as people's willingness to enforce it. Lila could have accepted Brennan's apology and moved on. Instead, she chose to hold him accountable through every legal avenue available. That's how systems change. We donated a significant portion of the settlement to the Civil Rights Legal Defense Fund, specifically earmarked for cases involving racial profiling in transportation settings. If our nightmare could help fund justice for others, the pain had purpose. 2 years later, Emma's second birthday party was held in our backyard in Atlanta, filled with family, friends, and the beautiful chaos of toddlers discovering cake. She ran through the grass on unsteady legs, her blonde curls bouncing, squealing with delight as David chased her with exaggerated slowness. My mother sat beside me watching her granddaughter play. Do you think about that day much anymore? Sometimes, I admitted. Usually when I see news stories about other families going through similar situations. But we made something good from it. That helps. The Morrison Protocol had expanded to 47 airports now. Training modules based on our case were being used in law enforcement academies across 12 states. Brennan's name had become shorthand in civil rights law classes for the catastrophic consequences of unchecked bias. As for Brennan himself, I'd heard he was working as a night custodian at a warehouse in rural Indiana, living in a small apartment, financially ruined by legal fees and the settlement he couldn't afford but his insurance wouldn't fully cover. His LinkedIn profile, when I'd checked once out of morbid curiosity, showed 0 connections and no recommendations. I felt no satisfaction in his suffering, but I felt no guilt either. He'd chosen his actions. He'd chosen to see my skin color and Emma's and construct a narrative of criminality rather than simply verify documentation. He'd chosen to play to a crowd's prejudices rather than follow protocol. He'd chosen authority over humanity. Those choices had consequences. Mama! Cake! Emma called, running toward me with frosting already smeared across her face. I scooped her up, this beautiful little girl who'd been at the center of a national conversation about race, family, and justice without having any idea. She'd grow up knowing her story, knowing that her mother had fought back when someone tried to separate them, knowing that injustice doesn't have to be accepted just because it comes from someone with authority. David joined us, wrapping his arms around both of us. "What are you thinking about? How far we've come," I said. "How far we still have to go." He kissed my forehead. "Together though. Always together." The real victory wasn't Brennan's termination or the settlement money or even the policy changes, though all those mattered. The real victory was in the hundreds of messages I'd received from other mothers, Black mothers, brown mothers, mothers in interracial relationships, telling me their own stories of being profiled, questioned, accused. And then telling me that seeing someone fight back and win had given them courage to report incidents they'd previously suffered in silence. To demand accountability. To refuse to accept discrimination as the price of existing in public spaces. One message stayed with me particularly. A woman named Kaisha from Detroit wrote, "I was accused of kidnapping my own son at a mall 3 years ago because he's lighter-skinned than me. I was so humiliated I never reported it. But watching what you did, how you stood your ground and made them face consequences, it made me realize silence only protects the people hurting us. I filed a complaint yesterday. Thank you for showing me it's possible to fight back." That message, and dozens like it, represented the true measure of impact. Not what happened to Brennan, but what happened to the countless other families who might never face that particular humiliation because protocols changed, because training improved, because people with authority finally understood that racial profiling had real, devastating costs. Emma would grow up in a world slightly better than the one I'd navigated. Not perfect, far from it, but better. And that incremental progress, paid for by our willingness to transform trauma into advocacy, was worth everything we'd endured. As the party continued around us, David's white family mixing seamlessly with my Black family, our daughter playing with cousins of every shade and combination, I felt something settle in my chest that had been unsettled since that September day. Peace. Not because justice had been served, though it had, but because we'd refused to let hatred and ignorance have the final word. Richard Brennan had looked at my daughter and seen a crime that needed investigating. I looked at my daughter and saw a future worth fighting for. He'd lost everything trying to tear us apart. We'd gained everything by refusing to be separated. And in the end, that was the only victory that truly mattered. The lesson: if you're someone who's experienced discrimination, know this: your dignity is not determined by other people's prejudices. Their assumptions reveal their limitations, not yours. And when you have the strength and resources to fight back, do it not for revenge, but for every person who comes after you who might be spared the same pain. If you're someone who's witnessed discrimination and stayed silent, consider this your invitation to speak up next time. That mother being profiled in the store, that family being questioned at the airport, that person being treated as suspicious simply for existing, they need witnesses willing to be allies, not spectators. And if you're someone with authority, a manager, an officer, a supervisor, remember that your power magnifies both your compassion and your prejudice. Choose carefully which one you amplify. The story of what happened at O'Hare that September day will outlive all of us. Emma will tell it to her children someday, explaining how her grandmother and grandfather refused to accept injustice, how they transformed a moment of hatred into a catalyst for change. And maybe, just maybe, she'd tell it in a world where such stories are relegated to history rather than current events. That's the world worth fighting for. That's the legacy worth building. And if this story moved you to think differently about the families you see, the assumptions you make, or the discrimination you witness, then share it, because awareness is the first step toward change, and change is the only path toward justice.